Rosada, do that again. Come on, you're right in front of the camera. I got it on.
Listen, don't get in front of the camera.
Amari, Rosada, move over. I got the camera on. Come on, don't put your hand in there. Okay, here we go.
All right. Okay.
We say surprise. What? Surprise! Wait, let me see.
Nature is a very mysterious phenomenon. I love nature because of the different surprises it holds. Nature can be both tranquil and dangerous. The whistles of wind, the rich color of blooming flowers, and the rush of flowing water are just some of the many things that make nature so cool. Sometimes, however, nature can be a pretty unpredictable entity. Take the squirting cucumber plant, for example. It has the capability of shooting its seeds outward in all directions as far as possible when ready to produce offspring. These seeds travel quite long distances, capable of landing in the most unusual of places. We too are born into unfamiliar places. From the moment of conception, our destinies begin to unfold. As we rest in our mother's womb, our futures have already begun to advance. Believe in destiny or not, we all await birth, where our personal stories begin. I grew up in the Bronx. It definitely isn't the nicest place in the world, but I like it here. You kind of just have to know where to be and at what time because the city can be pretty dangerous. It's all about being street smart. Growing up, I always put a smile on my grandparents' face. They always were always so proud of me. I was on honor roll since the 7th grade. In the 8th grade, I was voted school's treasurer. I was the best flutist in my 8th grade band. When I got into high school, things got much better with my social skills. I became very active in my high school. I got an internship at the Bronx Zoo where we studied exhibits and actually created a mock one. I was president of the Spanish Honor Society. I was in the guitar club, art club, and leadership committee. I got a summer job as a lifeguard, which I did for 3 years, and managed to save 7 active drowning victims. I got a full paid tuition scholarship from the Posse Foundation for leadership and academic achievement to Franklin Marshall College. Most people are now probably thinking, wow, this kid grew up lucky. Yes and no. The path one takes to achieve greatness is never an easy one. Mostly because you begin in a place of darkness, a place beyond your control. And as you continue through life, that path then can become much clearer. To understand where my path began, meet my parents. Most people say I look just like my dad. He was a very outgoing kind of man. My father was a comedian and loved making people laugh as well as hearing a good joke. My father was far from shy and was always well dressed and groomed. He made sure his hair was flawless and clothes were well kept. It makes sense on why he fell in love with my mom. My mom, in addition to being gorgeous, was also a very funny person. She could put a smile on the angriest person's face. Her personality was very carefree. She would walk down those streets without a worry in the world. Both my parents, however, met in a drug rehab. Both were doing really well until they were kicked out of the program. According to rehabilitation center rules, romantic or sexual relationships are not permitted. So, my parents fell back into their old habits as they continued their lives. Years later, my mom gave birth to 4 kids with my father. I was the eldest of the 4, and then my brother who was just 11 months younger than me, and then my 2 little sisters who were just a year and a half apart. We were all one big happy family until I was about 6 years old. I remember my dad waking me and my brother up, freaking out. My mother tried to calm him down, but he darted out of the apartment. A few hours later, we were told he had passed. I was too young to really understand any of what was going on, but to this day his cause of death remains a mystery. Despite this tragedy, my mother tried her best to keep us five united as best she could, and was successful until a few years went by where we were evicted from our home. My sister stood with my grandparents as my brother, mom, and I searched for a place to live. There were times where we'd wander the city for hours until a place was found. I remember being in waiting rooms filled with crazy people for long periods of time, where sometimes we'd even fall asleep. I just didn't understand why we had to be there. We eventually found temporary housing in Manhattan and things improved, only slightly because she was still secretly using drugs. So my brother and I found ways to distract ourselves by wandering the city. One day, however, my mom wakes us up and tells us she'd be right back. My brother and I, not worried at all, went back to sleep. A few hours later, social services knocks on our door and tells us to go with them. They took us to a foster home where we stood for a little. Just as we were getting ready for bed, they tell us to pack our stuff. We're taking you to your grandparents. My brother and I were the happiest people after that. When we were living with our parents, our grandparents always did their best to help my mom out. My grandmother is an extraordinary person. Not only did she raise 10 kids of her own with my grandfather, but at the age of 74, she still decided to continue raising kids by taking custody of us four. Both my grandparents raised us very well, but I mentioned my grandmother because she was the maternal idol we lacked, and yet was very much in need of. So we stayed with our grandparents until my mom could get better. And so that is what happened. We visited our mother every few weeks and lived with my grandparents. After several months of visiting my mother, one day she just never showed up. So visits stopped and years went by. During those years, my grandmother helped us grow as best she could despite our mom's absence. What I love about my grandmother was her cooking. She believed in cooking food from scratch, and so we had home-cooked meals every day. She made sure we were never out late and made sure that our decisions were based around education. What I love about my grandmother was she raised us to teach ourselves. She made sure we not only listened but learned. Before living with my grandmother, school was not even something I considered important. This resulted in my repeating the 3rd grade. My grandmother taught me to see education as something I'm doing for myself, which will open up many other doors. She also introduced religion to us. She would always tell me, it's God who is going to help you when you have no one else. So, she took us to church every Sunday, prayed the rosary with us every night, and took us to get our sacraments done. It was funny because all these things while growing up were frustrating to do and despised doing them. Now that I am older, these things help make me the person I am now, which I have no regrets about. As time went on, we thought about our mom every single day. We would stare out our window at the passing subway train cars and wonder if she was ever in one of those trains coming to see us. Except she never was. I promised myself that I would one day find her when I graduated college and show her who we've become. I was in the 8th grade coming home from school when my grandparents sit us all down. She begins crying and tells us, "Your mom is in a much better place."
It's a baby shower! We suckered you! Wait, I want to get this. I want to see this on camera.
Look at, let me take a rip on the killer. Look at.
Where's the baby?
Move over, Lando, move over. I got this all on tape. Hey, let me turn this way. Hurry up, I got it wrong. Oh my God!
Kanta ka pa. Papi, kanta.
Life is very unexpected and sudden. I never asked for any of this. I was just born and grew through it. But that is why nature is so beautiful. It can surprise you despite not having control over where you start off. I always wondered if my parents cared for us four, but I eventually figured out that my parents loved each and every one of us with all their heart. They just made bad decisions which affected everything else. My grandmother knew that our decisions were just as important and took it upon herself to keep us four united and grow together. She has accomplished a lot raising us. She raised us to be strong, happy, smart, and most of all successful individuals, just like any mother would. I can't even express how grateful I am to have her.
That's it?
Pollo de canela, lirio al capullo, duérmete mi amorcito mientras te arrullo. Duérmete que del alma mis cantos brota, un delirio de amores en cada nota. Pero si era bien mío, los ojos bellos, aunque tu madre muera sin verse en ellos. Ah.